The petition came to me second-hand, the way most lies do. My steward Aldrich laid the summary on my desk during the archive hour, the 1 hour of the day I had told him repeatedly that I did not want to be interrupted, and stood at the edge of my patience while I read it. A woman, a Veldren claimant. She had appeared before the council at dawn, presented a clay land seal she said was her father's original mark, and been dismissed inside 40 minutes on the grounds that the Veldren territory had transferred by lawful deed to the North brothers 14 months prior, that no such bloodline claimant existed on any current register, and that the seal she offered could not be authenticated without the archive master's seal of verification, which she did not have. The council had told her to leave Ashenmore by morning. "She's still here," Aldrich said. "In the lower hall. She asked if she could have the written dismissal to read before she went. Vane gave it to her just to get her to sit down." I looked at the summary again. Veldren, the old timber territory along the Kelda River basin, the stands of black pine that the North brothers had logged at twice the rate of any previous holder in the 14 months since they'd acquired it. I knew that rate because I had the reports. I had a great many reports. Being Alpha King of Ashenmore meant I was in the business of reading things that other people preferred I didn't read, and the Kelda Basin's timber yield was one of several numbers that had been sitting in the back of my mind like a stone in a boot. Not urgent. Not yet, but there. "What does she look like?" I said. Aldrich blinked. It was not the question he had expected. "Composed," he said after a pause. She's not weeping, my lord, if that's what you mean. She's reading the dismissal." A woman who had just had her family land confirmed stolen from her, sitting in the lower hall of my court reading the document that said so, not weeping. I put down the report I'd been working on and went to look at her myself. She was seated at the long bench beneath the east window, the written dismissal in her left hand and a short pencil in her right. When I came into the hall, she did not look up immediately. She was finishing a line in the margin, and she finished it before she raised her eyes. That one small thing told me more about her than the steward's report had managed. She was perhaps 30, fine-boned, dressed for a journey that had been longer than expected. The traveling cloak was good quality but well worn, and there was road dust still on her boots that the hall's stone floors hadn't shed. Her face, when she looked up at me, was still. Not composed in the way of practiced court performance, composed in the way of someone who has decided that grief is not going to be useful right now, and has set it aside. She recognized me at once. She stood, and she did not make a speech about it. She simply stood and waited to hear what I had come to say. "The council's written dismissal," I said. "You're annotating it." "I'm noting the errors," she said. "I thought it might be useful for whoever reviews the case after I'm gone." "What errors?" She held the paper out to me. In the margin beside the council's third point, that no bloodline claimant exists on any current register, she had written, in a clear, small hand, "Veldren bloodline register last updated 16 years ago. Current register predates the claimant's majority." The absence of her name reflects the register's age, not the absence of the claim. It was not a plea, it was a correction. "Show me the seal," I said. She reached into the satchel at her feet without hesitation and placed the clay seal on the bench between us. It was old. The clay had the particular density of age, and the mark pressed into it was the Veldren tree cross, the one I knew from the pre-reform land records that predated the North transfer by 40 years. The pressing was deep and clean. It had been made by someone who expected it to last. "My father pressed that the winter before he died," she said. "I was 17. He pressed it in front of 2 witnesses whose names are on the reverse. You can read them, they haven't been scraped. He told me to keep it because land records go wrong and seals don't lie." I turned the seal over. 2 names, small and careful, pressed into the reverse face. Halden Rowe, Myra Selwyn, formerly of Veldren. I looked at her. "You are Myra of Veldren." I was, she said steadily. I'm told the North brothers are now. I did not tell her what I intended to do. I told her only that she should remain in Ashenmore one more night, that I wanted the archive master to look at the seal, and I had Aldrich arrange a guest room in the East Corridor without explaining my reasoning to anyone, which meant that by the time I reached the archive, Aldrich's raised eyebrow had already preceded me. Bram, my archive master, was a small and meticulous man who had served 3 Alpha Kings and trusted none of them entirely, which was why I trusted him. I gave him the seal and told him what I wanted, the original Veldren land record, the transfer deed by which the North brothers had acquired the territory, and any registration of a claimant's challenge filed in the last 2 years. He looked at the seal, looked at me, and did not ask questions. I returned to the archive at the second bell of evening. Bram had set out 3 documents on the long reading table. The original Veldren land record, pressed and sealed 41 years ago under the old form, the North transfer deed, dated 14 months past, and the transfer deed's notarial registration, which bore a verification seal from the court's own registrar. The original is sound, Bram said. The bloodline mark in the clay matches the tree cross in the land record exactly. Same pressing depth, same chisel angle. That seal is original. And the transfer deed. He set his finger on a line near the base of the North document. This is the difficulty, my lord. The transfer deed names a prior holder as one Veldren Martin, the woman's father, but the land record gives the father's name as Veldren Aldis. Martin and Aldis are different men. Someone transferred a property from a man who was not named in the original record. I looked at the line. It was a small error, the kind that would pass unremarked in a council review that was moving quickly and had no reason to look for it, the kind that would not pass a careful reading. Has this been noted before? I said. A challenge was filed 18 months ago, Bram said. It was dismissed at intake. The intake record cites insufficient documentation. 18 months ago. The challenge would have been hers. She'd been fighting this since before the ink on the transfer deed was dry. Dismissed at intake meant it never reached a hearing. Someone at intake level had made certain of that. I was beginning to understand the shape of the thing. Pull the intake record, I said, and whatever else we have on the North acquisition of Veldren, all of it, tonight. My wolf had been quiet all day, not the quiet of patience, but the quiet of attention, the particular stillness that meant something was being decided. It had started in the lower hall, when I'd looked at her handwriting in the margin of the dismissal. By the time I was pulling documents from the Ashenmore archive at the 9th hour of evening, my wolf's attention had settled into something I recognized but had not felt in a long time. The certainty, not yet named, that whatever came next would be different from what had come before. I had not expected a mate. I had in the last several years quietly stopped expecting one. The Alpha King of Ashenmore had plenty of candidates. The council produced them with depressing regularity, and I had found, candidate by candidate, that I was not moved. Not by beauty, not by rank, not by the careful performances of women who had been told what I was looking for and had done their best to provide it. My wolf tolerated them. It had never gone still for any of them. It had gone still the moment she finished her margin note, before she looked up. I did not examine this yet. I had documents to read. At the midnight bell, I carried 3 files to the East Corridor. She opened the door at my second knock, fully dressed, a lamp in her hand. She had not slept. She looked at the files under my arm and stepped back from the door without speaking, making room. The room was small and plain. The East Corridor was the less formal guest accommodation, and I had not thought through the implications of putting her there before Aldrich had already done it. She had her satchel open on the table, her own papers spread out around the lamp. When I set my 3 files beside them and we both looked at what was on the table, she was the one who reached past me, without ceremony, and drew out the North transfer deed. The name, she said immediately. She had her finger on the line that Bram had found. "Martin. My father's name was Aldous. I've been trying to explain that for 18 months. "I know," I said. "I've seen the intake dismissal. It was filed 3 months after the transfer deed was registered, and the intake officer who dismissed it was appointed to his position 4 months before the transfer deed was registered." She was quiet for a moment. "The North brothers had him placed." "I believe so." I set the third file on the table. "This is what I want you to look at. It's the registration of the notarial seal on the transfer deed. The notary who verified the transfer is listed here, a man named Coors, operating out of the Kelda River town of Ashfin. I have in my archive a record of 2 previous notarial registrations under that name. This seal does not match either of them." She looked at the 3 seals laid side by side. Then she looked at me. "You found a forged notary," she said. "I found an inconsistency that points to one. Formally, I would need Coors to be produced and examined." I paused. "I do not think that will be difficult. Men who are paid to forge documents once are often paid to do it again, and men who are paid to do it again are generally found." My wolf through all of this was watching her the way it watched things that mattered, without urgency, without noise, with the complete attentiveness of a creature that has identified the most important thing in the room and will not look away from it. She was working through the files methodically, one hand moving documents, the other pressed flat on the table. She did not perform. She did not thank me or plead with me or look at me for reassurance. She read. That was the moment I understood what my wolf already knew. She was my fated mate. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she needed protecting, though she had been badly wronged. But because she read the same documents I read and reached the same conclusions, and she did not look to me to tell her what she found, she told me. And my wolf, which had been patient and quiet through years of candidates and counsel lists, and the careful performances of women doing their best to be what they thought I wanted, had recognized in her the thing I had not known I was looking for, a mind that matched mine, and a steadiness that did not flinch. I did not say any of this. It was midnight, and she had a vindication to win. "In the morning," I said, "I am going to bring this before the court." She looked up from the documents. "You believe me?" "I believed you at the lower hall," I said. "The documents confirm what you already knew. The court will need the confirmation." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The North brothers have allies on your council." "I know, they'll be in the room." "And you're not concerned about that?" "I am concerned about a great many things," I said. "The North brothers' allies are not among them." For the first time since I had entered the hall that morning and found her annotating her dismissal, the steadiness in her face shifted, not into fear, not into gratitude, but into something smaller and more honest than either. She was tired. She had been fighting this for 18 months, alone, and she was very tired, and she had just been told that it was almost over. "You should sleep," I said. She almost smiled. "So should you." I took the documents and left her to it. In the morning, I had the North brothers summoned to the court chamber before the assembled lords of Ashenmore, and I had Myra of Veldren brought in at the same time. She was dressed in the same traveling clothes. She had nothing else, and she stood straight in them and did not look at the North brothers at all, which was, I thought, the correct instinct. I set the documents on the reading table, and I did not make a speech. I had Bram read the original Veldren land record. I had him read the name on the transfer deed, Veldren Martin. I had him read the name in the original record, Veldren Aldous. I had him place the 3 notarial seals side by side and state, in his precise and unimprovable way, that 2 of them were consistent with each other, and the third was not consistent with either. The North brothers' advocate began to speak. I let him begin, and then I said, "Before you continue, is there anyone in this room who would like to assert that the name Martin and the name Aldous refer to the same man?" No one spoke. Then the transfer deed names a person who does not appear in the original Veldran land record, I said. The territory was transferred from a name that did not exist. The transfer is void. The elder North brother, Alvin, broad-shouldered and accustomed to being the largest person in a room, looked at his council allies. The allies were looking at the table. Furthermore, I said, I intend to have the notary corps brought to Ashenmore for examination on the matter of the transfer verification. If any member of this court would like to advise me that this is unnecessary, I am prepared to hear their reasoning. No one offered any. It was, Bram told me afterward, the shortest court proceeding in the Ashenmore record, 23 minutes. The North brothers were stripped of the Veldran territory pending the full hearing, which, in the event, confirmed the forgery inside a fortnight and was not the interesting part. The interesting part was the moment, standing in the court chamber with the assembled lords of Ashenmore watching, when I crossed to where Myra stood and placed the land seal in her hand. It was old clay, her father's pressing, the tree cross mark that matched the record. I set it in her palm, and then I closed her fingers around it, and I held her closed hand in both of mine for a moment before I looked up and found her eyes. She looked at me the way she had looked at the documents the night before, with total attention, taking the measure of what was actually there, not what she had been told to expect. Myra of Veldran, I said, loud enough that the court heard it. Your title and your land are restored. I would ask you to remain in Ashenmore. For how long, she said. Permanently, I said, as my Luna. Behind me, I heard the chamber go quiet in the particular way it goes quiet when something has occurred that no one anticipated and everyone will discuss for years. The council lords who had dismissed her petition that morning were very still. The allies of the North brothers were looking at the table again. Myra of Veldran looked at the seal in her hand, and then at me, and then at the seal again, not performing uncertainty, actually taking a moment to decide. Then she said, I'll need to arrange for the Kelda Basin's timber rate to be reviewed. I know, I said, I have the reports. So do I, she said. Mine are more complete. My wolf, which had been patient and attentive since the moment she'd finished her margin note, before looking up at me in the lower hall, settled into a warmth I had not felt before, certain and quiet. The way warmth is when it is the right kind and has come to stay. I have been Alpha King of Ashenmore for 11 years, and in that time I have sat through a great many court proceedings, reviewed a great many documents, and come to a number of conclusions that my counsel would have preferred I hadn't. I have not regretted the habit. What I had not anticipated, in 11 years of reading things carefully, was that the most important thing I would ever read would be 3 words in a dismissal's margin. The register's age, written in a hand I would come to know as well as my own. Myra restored the Kelda Basin's timber yield to sustainable rate in her first year of holding Veldran, a fact that required 2 council arguments and 1 very thorough report, which she presented herself, and which no one disputed because she had anticipated every objection and addressed it in footnote. The North brothers' allies on my council did not serve out their terms. The notary corps was found, examined, and found wanting in the ways I had expected, and his examination produced 2 further cases of document fraud that had been running quietly for years. We spent the better part of a winter cleaning them out. Ashenmore's great dog, Drum, a gray-muzzled hound who had served the court for 9 years and trusted no one he hadn't known since puppyhood, chose his allegiance 3 days after Myra arrived, and thereafter was found wherever she was, which meant he was most often found in the archive. We were there often. The morning after the court proceeding, when the ruling was recorded and the documents were sealed, and the work was, for a moment, done, I found her at the archive table with the land seal between her hands and Drum asleep across her feet. She was not reading anything. She was looking at the seal her father's pressing, the tree cross mark, the two names on the reverse, with the expression of someone who has carried a heavy thing for a long time and has only just set it down. I sat across from her and put my hand over hers, seal and all. She did not move her hand away. She looked at me with that total, uncalculated attention, taking the measure of what was actually present. "Your counsel is going to have opinions," she said. "They have opinions about everything," I said. "It doesn't slow me down." "Your timber reports are incomplete." "You mentioned," I said. "I look forward to the footnotes." She almost smiled again. It was closer than the night before. My wolf noted this and was content. Outside the archive windows, Ashenmoor's court was waking, the bells of the morning watch, the sound of the stable yard, the early light coming in cold off the southern plains, and laying itself across the stone floor in long pale lines. The land seal sat between our hands on the table, old clay and a deep-pressed mark, and two names that had been right all along, waiting to be read by someone who was looking carefully enough. That is all it had needed, someone to look. I had spent 11 years reading documents that other people preferred I didn't read, and I had understood, when I walked into the lower hall and found her annotating her dismissal, that I had been preparing for exactly this without knowing it, for a woman who read what was actually there, not what she had been told to see, and who set her pencil down before she looked up, because the sentence needed to be finished first. My name is Calder of Ashenmoor, and I have kept the land seal on the archive table ever since, not as a display, as a reminder that the truth does not disappear when it is dismissed. It waits, pressed deep and patient, for the one who is willing to read it. Myra of Veldren is my Luna, and she has more complete reports on every subject in my kingdom than I do, and she is the only person in 11 years who has ever corrected Bram's filing system and had him thank her for it. Drum is still asleep across her feet. I am, for the first time in 11 years, not looking at documents,